Imagine realizing that the cost of maintaining a fragile, newly won piece might literally be your firstborn child.
Yeah, just think about that for a second. It's an impossible situation.
Right. You have a society that has finally, after, millennia of brutal bloodshed, silenced the battlefield, only to discover that the philosophical war is about to tear them apart from the inside out.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
And, right as you're grappling with that horrific, unthinkable reality, an ancient, godlike superpower descends from the sky.
Oh, yeah. And they are demanding you hand over a fugitive hidden among your ranks.
Exactly.
That is the exact geopolitical nightmare at the center of Amelia Atwater-Rhodes' epic Snakecharm. And we have a really extensive excerpt of this text today.
We do, and it's a dense one.
It really is. So our mission today is to unpack the incredibly fragile politics of a newly forged peace. We're going to look at the crushing weight of ancient mythology on a modern society and explore the radical, desperate lengths that leaders will go to in order to build an entirely new world.
It's going to be an intense journey.
Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine you are standing in a crowded, colorful marketplace. You are surrounded by people who literally until yesterday were your mortal enemies.
Right.
You are trying to buy bread from someone whose ancestors killed yours. That is the world we're stepping into.
It is a breathtaking and honestly deeply uncomfortable premise because it forces us to confront a reality we usually we kind of gloss over in history.
Which is what, exactly?
Well, that peace is not merely the absence of war. I mean, peace is an active, ongoing, and often incredibly painful reconstruction of society.
Yeah, totally.
When the treaties are signed and the fighting stops, you don't magically erase the prejudice, right? You don't erase the systemic hatred or those deep historical grievances.
Yeah.
You move the battlefield.
Right. It shifts from the forests and the skies into the throne rooms, into the marketplaces, and most tragically, the nurseries.
Exactly. The central figures in our source text, Zane, the diente of the serpiente, and Danica, the tulithia of the Adians, they have stopped the physical war.
Mm-hmm.
But they're quickly discovering that the real work, the structural unweaving of hatred, has really only just begun.
Right, because stopping a sword swing is immediate, but stopping a prejudice takes generations.
Decades, at least. Usually much longer.
And to understand why this specific political landscape is such a total powder keg, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. We have to look at the sheer weight of ancient mythology in this universe.
Oh, absolutely. The mythology is everything here.
Because in this world, history isn't just something you read in a dusky textbook,
Yeah.
It is something that literally dictates your biology and your destiny.
Yeah, the lore is incredibly literal.
Our sources tell us that when Egypt was young, like when the first pyramids were being built, there lived a small, hidden civilization led by a coven of 13 men and women.
Dasi.
Yes, the Dasi. And they worshiped two highly contrasting dual gods.
Right, on Hammurabi and Anmik.
Yeah.
And understanding the friction between these twin powers is, well, it's absolutely the key to understanding every single conflict that ripples through this text.
Because they weren't just politicians, right? They had real magic.
Exactly. The Dasi wielded immense, tangible magic. And their magic was intrinsically tied to the philosophies of these gods. So Hammurabi was the god of life, light, love, and beauty.
Sort of the chaotic good.
Yeah, exactly. Her greatest gift to her people was free will. She represents abandon, passion, and equality. She is the chaotic, beautiful messiness of being alive. But, as with all universal forces, she had to have an opposite to maintain equilibrium.
And that opposite is Anmik.
Yes.
Anmik was the god of power, sleep, and silent peace. But what I find so compelling here, and the text explicitly states this, is that Anmik was not an evil god.
No, not at all.
He wasn't some devil figure they were trying to vanquish. He was a necessary counterweight.
Right. But we have to look closely at the mechanics of what he represents. With absolute power comes absolute force. Therefore, while Hammurabi gave the world freedom and equality, Anmik's gifts inherently required bondage and mastery.
Oh, wow. So peace through control.
Exactly. To achieve perfect peace, you have to eliminate the chaos of free will. The speakers for this darker god were just as revered as Hammurabi's, because the ancient Dasi inherently understood that you cannot have one without the other. If the balance is lost, reality itself unravels.
Which, of course, is exactly what happens. The balance shatters. According to the lore, the high priestess of the Dasi, a woman named Maeve, was the one holding this incredibly precarious balance together.
And then the disruptor arrives.
Right. A massive disruptor enters the system. This creature named Laban shows up. And at first, Maeve thinks he's a divine being, maybe the son of Hammurabi herself. But Laban demands that her coven worship him and him alone.
which is an immediate red flag in a dualistic society.
Obviously.
Maeve, being an incredibly astute leader, realizes that any true god of their pantheon would know that demanding soul worship destroys the balance. She knows Laban is dangerous, but, she's also pragmatic.
She has to be.
Right.
Yep.
She doesn't want to surrender her people's autonomy, but she can't openly fight a being of such immense power. So she uses the tools at her disposal. She seduces him. She attempts to manage the threat through intimacy and influence.
It's a very ancient world political strategy, and it sort of works, but with massive unintended consequences.
Massive.
In an attempt to win her favor, Laban gives Maeve ageless beauty and the ability to physically transform into an ivory-scaled viper.
Which is wild.
It is. And Maeve, trying to protect her coven, insists he grant animal forms to all her people. So Keisha, the high priestess of Anhamarach, gets the ebony scales of a king cobra. 7 others get graceful serpent forms, but, and this is the kicker, the 4 whose worship was dedicated to Anmik.
Yeah.
Jarsa, Araceli, Syfka, and Servos.
They don't get serpent forms.
No, they're given the majestic wings and deadly talons of falcons.
And if we map the sociological fallout of this moment, that is the exact second the world breaks. The magic Anmik had already given the falcons, that magic of mastery, stillness, and bondage, combined with Laban's new physical gifts, created an intoxicating and incredibly dangerous cocktail.
A recipe for disaster.
Absolutely. The falcons began recklessly practicing this dark absolute power. They began exerting mastery over others. Because they broke the social contract of balance, they were driven from the clan. Maeve's ivory-scaled kin, the White Vipers, eventually followed them, falling to Anmik's lures and entirely abandoning the balance.
Leaving the rest of the clan to pick up the pieces.
Precisely. Reluctantly, Keisha the Cobra rose to power to lead what was left of the people, and from her descended the Cobriana line, which is Zane's royal line in the present day.
Right.
Meanwhile, the descendants of the Falcons isolated themselves on a white island, hoarding the terrifying power of Anmik. This creates a profound, permanent divergence in the magical evolution of these species. Over thousands of years, the Falcons kept the immortal, godlike magic of Anmik,
while the others lost it.
Yeah, the Cobras and the Avians, who eventually split from each other, lost much of their ancient magic. But they retained Anhamarach's core gift: free will, passion, and emotion.
Now, wait a minute. Let me push back on this a little. I hear all this lore, and it's fascinating, but are modern serpents and avians really letting a 2,000-year-old mythological messy divorce dictate their current foreign policy?
It sounds crazy, right?
I mean, yeah. Zane is sitting in his palace right now. He's newly mated to the avian queen. They've achieved a tangible political peace that hasn't existed in millennia. And yet the sources describe him stressing out about whether his ancient ancestor, Keisha, felt fear in the night when Anmik's followers were driven away.
He's literally losing sleep over it.
It feels almost absurd. Are they really letting literal ghosts run their government?
It does seem completely irrational if you look at it from a modern, purely secular perspective. But if you look at the mechanics of intergenerational trauma, it makes perfect sense. This history isn't an abstract concept written on a scroll. It is biologically coded into them. Yes. When a cobra looks at an avian, they don't just see a political rival. A hawk has feathers that instinctively, on a biological level, trigger a serpent's ancient combat reflexes. A cobra has garnet eyes that avians intrinsically believe possess demonic power. They're living, breathing artifacts of this ancient schism. You can't just legislate away a biological response.
That makes sense. It's like the history is physically walking around the marketplace.
Exactly. And furthermore, the Falcons haven't just been passively sitting on their island for 2,000 years. They have expertly manipulated this history.
Oh, right, the proxy wars.
Yes. During the Avian-Serpiente War, the Falcons specifically secretly supplied the Avians with a weapon designed exclusively to eradicate Keisha's serpent kin. They have been silently orchestrating the destruction of Anhamarach's children from afar. They keep the wound infected.
Which brings us back to the philosophy of Anmik, because Anmik's gift is peace, right? But it's peace through absolute stillness.
Yes. To Anmik, and by extension the Falcons who worship him, peace is perfect, frozen perfection. Think of a photograph. Nothing moves, nothing changes, nothing degrades.
But people aren't photographs.
Exactly. Humans, avians, and serpiente are messy. We have free will. We make mistakes. We act on passion. We love and we fight. To a falcon, the chaotic, emotional lives of the lower courts aren't just distasteful. They are a literal disease that disrupts the perfect stillness of the universe.
So they just want to freeze everything.
The falcons represent absolute, chilling determinism. They achieve peace by completely stripping away your ability to choose anything else.
And because they isolated themselves to hoard this terrifying power, they became a myth, a boogeyman.
Yeah.
So when they suddenly reappear in the modern free world, it doesn't just ruffle feathers, it absolutely shatters the fragile psychological alliance Zane and Danica have built. Which brings us to the falcon interruption.
The arrival of Syfka.
Right. The scene where Syfka, who is the speaker for the Falcon Empress Jarsa, arrives in the serpiente market is genuinely chilling. Our sources paint this incredibly vivid picture. It's a vibrant, chaotic, loud serpiente market. And then there's just a flicker of shadow against the sun.
And everything stops.
Everyone freezes. There's a specific detail about a guy named Seth. He's a baker now, but he's a former serpiente soldier. This is a guy who survived a brutal, decades-long, bloody war. And he is literally trembling, dropping his wares at the mere shadow of a falcon in the sky.
It's pure terror.
Syfka lands, and she radiates this aura of intense heat and crystalline perfection. Pale gold and silver hair, crystalline blue eyes, aplomado falcon wings. And she looks at Zane and Danica, who are monarchs in their own right, with utter unfiltered disdain, and she demands they hand over a hidden falcon criminal.
And the specific nature of that demand perfectly illustrates the psychological warfare the Falcons employ. Syfka casually drops the bomb that this criminal they're looking for could be literally anyone in the crowd.
Because of the illusions.
Exactly. Because of their supreme illusion magic, a falcon doesn't just put on a disguise. They can perfectly mimic any gender, any coloring, any species. They can manipulate all 5 of your senses simultaneously.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This is the detail that actually kept me up last night. It's exactly like living through Cold War paranoia. But the sleeper agents have magical shape-shifting abilities and the power to literally rewrite your perception of reality.
It's impossible to defend against.
Right. How do you govern a society like that? Zane asks Syfka, totally reasonably, how they're supposed to find someone if there's no way to recognize them. And her response is just dripping with patronizing venom. She compares the serpiente's blindness to unmixed magic to a worm being blind to the sun. She says you only notice it when it scalds you. She's not asking for their help. She's mocking their structural inferiority.
And she's going through these formalities because on the Falcon Island, appearances and polite conventions are crucially important. They maintain a veneer of absolute civility, even while torture, manipulation, and memory erasure are openly practiced and condoned.
It's so twisted.
That juxtaposition of extreme politeness and absolute brutality is the defining hallmark of Falcon psychology.
But I'm trying to wrap my head around why she acts like this. Is she just cruel? I mean, why play these petty mind games with a baker in a market? If she has godlike power, why even bother talking to them?
It looks petty to us because we view time linearly in 80-year increments. But you have to strip away your human perspective to understand Syfka. She, like the other royal falcons, is essentially immortal.
Okay, immortality changes things.
Radically. To a being who is over 2,000 years old, human lifetimes are meaningless flashes. A human generation is like a season to them. You don't form deep emotional attachments to a single leaf on a tree because you know it will fall by autumn.
Oh, wow. That's bleak.
This makes negotiating with them inherently impossible. They literally do not value human life because it is too fleeting to matter. The only thing they value is permanence. They value pure-blooded falcon children who are incredibly rare because unmixed magic of stillness and death makes conception almost impossible.
So it's not even malice.
No, Syfka's arrogance isn't petty malice. It is the profound, chilling indifference of a god looking at a mayfly.
And she makes it perfectly clear that she views the new alliance between Zane and Danica as a joke. She tells Zane he's chasing a fanciful dream of harmony that is as impossible as a western sunrise. She actively tries to demoralize him, telling him to give up before his hopes turn to dust.
She's brutal.
She is a walking, talking embodiment of the old world, telling the new world it has no right to exist. And the timing of her arrival, it couldn't possibly be worse, because Syfka's absolute obsession with pure blood directly mirrors the internal, deeply hidden political crisis brewing in Zane and Danica's own courts.
Yes, the external threat of the Falcons is perfectly calibrated to act as a pressure cooker for their domestic nightmare, because the physical violence between the avians and the serpiente has ceased. But the cultural violence remains deeply, rigidly embedded in their institutions.
Right under the surface.
Exactly. And those institutions are about to be tested by biology. Zane and Danica are having a baby.
Now, in any normal context, a A royal pregnancy is the ultimate victory, right? It secures the line of succession. It brings the people together. It's a massive celebration. But in this newly forged peace, it is a crisis of unimaginable proportions. It is the central tragic dilemma of this deep dive.
It really is the core of the conflict.
Danica is a hawk. Zane is a cobra. They have forced their people to stop killing each other, but you can't just mandate away millennia of prejudice. We learn from the sources that the genetics in this world are very specific. The child of a cobra and any other serpent will always be a cobra.
Right.
But the child of a cobra and an avian, that is a totally unknown, terrifying equation to these people. The serpiente absolutely refuse to bow to what they call a feathered diente. They tolerate Danica as the naga, the queen consort, because her power is legally secondary to Zane's in their court. But a feathered king, unthinkable.
And the avians are equally, if not more, rigid.
Yeah.
They will never accept a scaled serpiente tulithia. What we are witnessing is a devastating realization of how systemic prejudice survives the end of a war.
It's so frustrating to watch.
Both courts, rather than celebrating the ultimate symbol of their union, immediately began plotting how to sanitize and control this mixed-blood child. The serpiente suggests they might tolerate the child, but only if it is raised entirely within the serpiente culture, completely alienated from its avian heritage, and eventually takes a pure serpiente mighty.
And the avians have an even more clinical approach. They demand the child be raised in the Hawk's Keep, isolated from Zane's influence, and immediately betrothed to an avian Alistair, essentially ensuring the Cobra bloodline is diluted and erased from their leadership over time.
It's incredibly calculating.
Zane and Danica achieved their ultimate political goal, only to realize the machinery of statecraft is demanding they feed their own child into the gears.
It's a horrific catch-22. If they protect their child, they risk shattering the peace and plunging their people back into a bloody war. If they maintain the peace, they lose their child to the crushing weight of institutional prejudice.
I want the listener to just pause and imagine that. Imagine dedicating your entire life to ending a conflict, watching your friends die, taking a literal knife in the back to stop the bloodshed, finally achieving the impossible. And then you realize your own people, the people you saved, would rather restart the war than let your mixed-race child rule them.
It breaks Zane's heart.
Zane's own personal guard, a man named Ailbe, who has fought beside him, calmly suggests that if the primary goal is peace, they should just hand the child over to the avians and let Zane name a purebred Cobra nephew as his heir.
The betrayal there is deep.
The absolute visceral horror Zane feels when Ailbe suggests this is palpable in the text. Zane has this agonizing nightmare where he's forced to give his baby to the rigid, emotionally sterile Hawk's Keep. He imagines her being betrothed before she can even speak, raised by strangers who will teach her to be ashamed of her passionate serpiente blood. How do you not just completely break down and give up?
Well, the psychological toll is immense, and how they react to this pressure perfectly illustrates their respective cultural conditioning. Zane, being a cobra, reacts with passionate, visible despair. He paces, he argues, he expresses his fury and terror openly. It's an externalization of trauma.
Very serpiente.
Yes. Danica, however, utilizes a deeply ingrained psychological defense mechanism that the avians call avian calm.
Right, let's talk about avian calm, because it sounds like a superpower, but it acts like a pathology.
That's a great way to frame it.
Oh.
The avians pride themselves on emotional detachment as a virtue of leadership. When faced with insurmountable grief or an impossible political situation, like the potential loss of her unborn child, Danica completely shuts down her emotional processing centers.
She just goes blank.
She locks her soul away behind a blank, serene facade. She compartmentalizes to an extreme degree so that she can continue to function logically as a queen. It's a survival tactic she learned from years of leading during a brutal war. But it deeply unnerves Zane.
I bet.
To a serpiente who values passion and expression as the core of life, this lack of visible emotion looks like a terrifying form of emotional death. He fears she is literally turning into a statue.
And we see that very specific brand of avian traditionalism, that cold, detached logic, perfectly embodied in Danica's mother, Nicola Shardae. Nicola is the ultimate polite political adversary. She doesn't scream, she doesn't threaten, she doesn't wield a sword. She politely weaponizes logic.
She's a master at it.
When she hears about the pregnancy, she immediately starts laying rhetorical traps. She says, "Of course you'll have the babe here. It seems right that avian doctors should attend to an avian mother."
It's brilliant political maneuvering. She's framing a major concession, having the heir born in avian territory, as a mere practical courtesy.
Exactly. And then she casually brings up finding an avian Alistair for the child, pointing out that without one, the girl will be an outcast. She uses the exact fears Zane has against him, asking if he would be selfish enough to keep the child for the serpiente world if it risks the peace of both lands. She is laying guilt trips disguised as diplomatic counsel.
Nakula represents the institutional inertia of the old world. I don't think she is actively, maliciously trying to start a war. She simply cannot conceptualize a paradigm where the old rules of racial purity and courtly tradition don't apply. Her worldview is fixed.
She literally can't see outside the box.
She forces Zane and Danica into a corner where every logical move leads to a loss. And here is where the narrative mechanics shift. When polite parlor debates and psychological traps fail to resolve the crisis of this mixed-race child, the old world's immune system resorts to the only tool it has left: physical violence.
Right. The pressure has to release somewhere, and it explodes into an assassination attempt. That's what triggers the ambush in the woods, which forces the hidden falcon entirely out of the shadows.
It's a chaotic scene.
Danica, Zane, and a small contingent of their guard are riding back to the Hawk's Keep. Suddenly, they are shadowed by a group of 6 attackers, 4 avians and 2 serpents. It's a coordinated, bipartisan strike team of pure-blood extremists.
The worst of both worlds.
They try to outrun them, but an arrow takes down Danica's horse. She falls, gravely injuring herself and the unborn child. In the chaos, Zane is slashed by an avian blade. And this isn't just a physical wound. The blade is coated in a substance called amhaj.
Amhaj. Amhaj is an incredibly specific, devastating detail in the world building. It is a deadly poison explicitly designed by the Falcons during the ancient wars. They gave it to the avians for the sole, explicit purpose of eradicating serpents.
It's basically a biological weapon.
It is completely harmless to avians and falcons. It won't even leave a rash. But it is instantly lethal to cobras. It attacks their specific biology. Zane describes the feeling not as a traditional pain, but as something suffocating and wrenching that freezes his breath and darkens his vision instantly. His nervous system is shutting down. He is moments away from death.
And this is the moment where the Sparrow Guard, Erica, who has been a background character up to this point, steps in and reveals who she truly is. Erica grabs Zane, and she does something the sources call force changing. We need to talk about the mechanics of this because it is wild.
It is intensely powerful magic.
Kel, which we learn is Erica's true falcon name, literally reaches into Zane's magical energy and forces his physical body to shift shapes. But instead of letting the poison spread, she uses her own magic to draw the lethal amhaj poison out of his bloodstream and directly into her own body.
Because she is a falcon, the poison is inert to her. But the act of doing this is a stunning display of the sheer, terrifying power of falcon magic. She is manipulating flesh, blood, and magical energy at a molecular level.
It's like magical surgery.
Exactly. She is overriding Zane's biological autonomy to save his life. And then she goes into the room where Danica is bleeding to death from the fall. She literally, as she describes it, puts the hurt pieces together again to save Danica and the baby.
But this isn't a miraculous video game heal where your health bar just fills back up. There's a brutal cost.
Always. Falcon magic, rooted in Onmic's philosophy of stillness, is not inherently healing or restorative. It is binding. It is structural. It holds things in place. So while Kel manages to structurally repair Danica's body enough to save her life and the life of the unborn daughter, the consequence of this magical reconstruction is severe and permanent.
The magic alters her biology.
Yes. Danica will never be able to have another child. The structural integrity of her body has been fundamentally changed by Onmic's power.
The tragedy of that cost is incredibly heavy. They save this one child, but the dream of a large, blended family is permanently destroyed. And Kel's own backstory, which we learn in the aftermath, is equally devastating.
Her past is so dark.
When Zane questions her, Kel reveals that she was once a member of the Empress's Mercy, which sounds nice, but the Mercy is essentially an elite, immortal execution and torture squad that serves the Falcon royal family directly.
The irony of the name is chilling.
Right. Kel fled the White City of Onmic because her working partner, a woman she cherished like a sister, committed an act of treason. Her partner simply spoke out against a secret the Empress wanted kept hidden. By strict Falcon law, Kel was required to execute her own partner.
It's the ultimate test of Onmic's determinism. Does your loyalty to the state override your free will and your love? For Kel, the answer was no. She refused to torture her best friend to death, so she fled. She immersed herself in the magic of a dying sparrow named Erica, literally stealing her form to hide among the avians.
But wait, Before we focus entirely on Kel, I want to look at the assassins for a second because the sources present a massive ethical dilemma here. When the royal guards interrogate the lone surviving assassin, a young avian woman, she is weeping hysterically.
She's completely broken.
She's thanking the sky that Danica is alive. She claims she never meant to hurt the child. She says that a tall, fair, foreign avian woman, who is very clearly Syfka in disguise, spoke to them in the marketplace, and suddenly the plan to assassinate the queen just made sense.
That's the terrifying part.
Kel explains that Syfka likely used something called drawing magic. Kel says it can't plant an idea you've never had. But if you have a passing prejudiced thought, even a subconscious one, the magic reaches in and removes all your moral, ethical, and practical inhibitions.
It isolates the darkest part of your psyche and turns off the safety switches.
Exactly. So I have to ask, if a magical superpower literally reaches into your brain, alters your neurochemistry, and completely removes your conscience, are you actually guilty of treason? Can you be held responsible for an action you took when your free will was magically amputated?
This raises an important question about the ethics of determinism and culpability. In our modern legal systems, we consider concepts like temporary insanity, coercion, or diminished capacity. But Falcon magic operates on a level that obliterates the very concept of free will, which, remember, was Anhamerak's core gift to humanity.
So they didn't even have a choice.
Syfka didn't just coerce these attackers. She fundamentally, magically altered their moral reasoning. From a philosophical standpoint, the assassins are absolutely victims of a proxy war. They are mortal pawns manipulated by a godlike being to achieve a political disruption.
Yet 5 of them are dead, killed by the royal flight in defense of the queen.
Exactly. It highlights the devastating collateral damage that occurs when immortals play political games with mortal lives. The tragedy isn't just that they attacked the queen. The tragedy is that their agency was stolen from them, and they died for an ideology planted in their heads by an immortal who views them as disposable.
It's completely unfair, and the twists in this narrative just keep coming. Kel's heroic use of her molecular magic leaves a massive magical signature. It acts like a flare, exposing her true identity to the Falcons.
She knows she's caught.
She accepts her fate. She kneels before Danica, acknowledging that she is a traitor to her empress, and prepares to hand herself over to Syfka to protect the keep from further retribution. But here is the brilliant, heart-stopping twist. When Syfka arrives, she looks at Kel with complete blank disdain.
This scene is brutal.
Syfka says the empress doesn't care about Kel anymore. She tells Kel that a stolen form couldn't hide her, that she recognized Kel immediately in the marketplace, but she simply did not care. Kel isn't the fugitive the Falcons are actually looking for. Syfka tells Kel to stay in this backward land and rot.
It is a moment of profound psychological cruelty. Kel has spent years living in absolute terror, looking over her shoulder, believing she is the target of a massive imperial manhunt. She thought her rebellion mattered. Syfka casually strips away even that dark significance.
It's just so dismissive.
She reduces Kel's profound moral stand, refusing to execute her friend, to an irrelevant temper tantrum that the Empress has already forgotten.
It's like finding out you aren't even the main character in your own tragedy. But the relief of that realization is instantly shattered. Because if Kel isn't the target, who is? Syfka promises that someone else from the royal house will come for the true fugitive. And if Syfka, who is already terrifying, isn't high-ranking enough to handle the extraction, the true fugitive must be someone incredibly important.
They didn't just poke a bear. They summoned the entire avalanche. That complete failure to protect their borders from Syfka's magical proxy war inevitably draws the attention of the actual imperial leadership.
And boy, do they send the heavy artillery. The arrival of Araceli at the Hawk's Keep is nothing short of an apocalyptic event. Araceli is the heir to the Falcon Empress.
She is nightmare fuel.
The visual the sources paint is terrifying in its majesty. She has silver blonde hair, pale opal eyes, violet-black falcon wings with reddish undersides, and gauntlets that look like the golden snakeskin of a Burmese python. She carries a simple dagger dripping with lethal poison. But it's not her weapons that are terrifying, it's her presence.
It's the aura.
She doesn't just walk into the room. She projects an aura of absolute crushing dominance. Even Zane, the fiercely proud Cobra King, finds himself instinctively recoiling and hissing just from her gaze. And she issues an ultimatum. If her falcon is not standing before her in 2 minutes, she will dismantle the keep stone by stone and slaughter everyone inside until she finds him.
Araceli is the pure embodiment of Onmic's terrifying power. She's the physical manifestation of peace through bondage, There's no negotiation with her, no reasoning, no appeal to empathy or diplomacy. She operates on a level of absolute authority that the avian and serpiente courts cannot even begin to
And they
comprehend.
are completely out of their league.
The power dynamic is completely, utterly asymmetrical. Zane and Danica are monarchs in their world, but in the face of Araceli, they are entirely powerless. Their armies, their guards, their titles mean absolutely nothing.
And the true horror is revealed when the hidden falcon finally steps forward to prevent the slaughter. The reveal is an absolute gut punch. Andreos, also known as Ray, the stoic, fiercely loyal captain of the royal flight, the man who has protected Danica since she was a child, who has been a pillar of the new peace. He steps forward, he drops his glamour, he addresses Araceli as my mother.
It changes everything.
Ray, the loyal mortal crow, is actually Sebastian, the only son of the heir to the Falcon Empress.
It's a phenomenal reveal that forces us to recontextualize his entire character history. We learned earlier in the sources that a young falcon named Sebastian visited the Hawk's Keep as a 12-year-old ambassador. He played with a young Danica and declared to his handlers that he wanted to stay and be her Alistair, her sworn protector and mate.
And they dragged him back, right?
Syfka dragged him back to the island for that insolence. Later, we learned that a young avian guard named Ray was supposedly poisoned during a serpiente attack, and Danica thought Ray had miraculously survived, though his personality changed.
But now the pieces click together.
Exactly. The real Ray died. And Sebastian, desperate to escape the sterile cruelty of the White City, used his immense royal falcon magic to force change himself into the dying crow's form. He gave up his royal heritage, his incredible magic, and his immortal life to live as a mortal guard, just to protect the girl he remembered playing with.
His plea to Araceli when he steps forward is absolutely heartbreaking. He says, I am no nestling. I may be young compared to some, but I am no child. He begs her to let him stay. He says, Anmik was never my home.
It's so tragic.
He chose the messy, emotional, mortal world of the avians because the cold, torturous perfection of the White City was unbearable to his soul. He wanted the empathy of the lower courts over the godhood of his mother, but his mother doesn't care.
She doesn't view him as a person making a choice. She views him as state property that has been misplaced.
And this is where the narrative really departs from traditional fantasy tropes. This isn't a boss fight. The heroes don't level up, remember a magical prophecy, and defeat the villain. It's like a Category 5 hurricane hitting your house. You don't grab a sword and fight a hurricane. You just hunker down, try to survive it, and look at the wreckage when it passes.
That is a perfect analogy. The powerlessness is absolute. When Araceli orders her guards to take Ray, Danica snaps. She breaks completely out of her avian calm. The compartmentalization shatters. She screams at Araceli, calling her a pompous hoverhawk, and physically charges at her to save Ray.
And she doesn't even stand a chance.
No, Araceli doesn't even draw a weapon. She casually, effortlessly swathes her down with magic. She uses indigo black falcon energy to pin Danica to the floor, holding a poisoned blade to her throat. She casually mentions she could simplify all their political problems by pushing the blade through Danica and her mongrel child right then and there.
The heroes completely lose. There is no last-minute rescue. Ray is subjected to a painful force change back into a falcon. The text describes him crying out in sheer agony as his body is ripped back into its immortal form and he is dragged away back to the psychological torture of the White City. Kel, who sees this happening, flies after them in a completely suicidal rescue attempt and is also captured.
It is a devastating total defeat. Zane and Danica are left standing in the literal and metaphorical wreckage of their court. Danica retreats into a terrifyingly blank, emotionless state to cope with the trauma of losing the man who has protected her entire life.
And it forces a massive realization. They are utterly outmatched by the power of the old world. But worse, they realize that the existing avian and serpiente courts are too entrenched in their old prejudices to ever truly accept their child or unify to defend against external threats like the falcons. The legacy infrastructure is too broken. You can't fix a system that is fundamentally designed to divide. So what does this all mean? It means you have to build a new paradigm.
Exactly. You can't patch a sinking ship. You have to build a new boat. This brings us to the radical innovation of Wyvern's court. In their grief, trying to find some kind of leverage or way to save Ray, the characters turn to the ancient texts hidden in the dancer's nest, Shardae, and they discover a massive historical revelation hidden in the art.
The symbols.
Yes. An avian artist paints a design overlapping the serpiente symbol, the onle, with the avian symbol, the seal of Alistair. And to their shock, the two symbols fit together perfectly. They aren't just similar, they're actually two halves of the exact same ancient glyph.
This completely blows their minds because it suggests that before the Thousand-Year War, before the history books were written in the blood of the fallen, the avians and serpiente weren't just allies. They might have been a single, seamlessly integrated culture. The word Alistair, the avian term for a sworn protector and mate, might actually stem from the ancient serpiente word anli, meaning fate or promise. The roots of their languages and cultures are intertwined.
Armed with this knowledge, Danica and Zane conceive of Wyvern's court. A wyvern is a mythical creature, a winged serpent. It is the absolute perfect metaphor for their unborn child.
It's genius. Instead of forcing their child to choose between being a cobra or a hawk, instead of subjecting her to the rigid purity tests of the Hawk's Keep or the Serpiente Palace, they decide to step outside the system entirely. They choose a neutral valley bordering wolf territory where they will build a new society from scratch. Here, avians and serpents will live, trade, and learn together.
It is a profound philosophical rejection of both the Falcon's ideology of purity and separation and their own court's legacy of prejudice. By intentionally combining the cultures, they are attempting to reverse the ancient tragedy of Maeve's coven splitting. They are actively trying to restore the lost balance of Anhamarok and Anmek.
It's the ultimate startup mentality applied to nation building. When the legacy system is too bloated with historical debt to fix, you go to a neutral valley and build a completely new paradigm. And the sources show us both the immediate excitement and the immediate cultural friction of this startup phase. Tadeo, a young raven who has bounced between a dozen apprenticeships, suddenly finds his life's calling, mapping out the valley, finding fresh springs in the cliffs, and designing a palace where both cultures can thrive. He's energized by the innovation.
But then you have the pushback. You have Lincoln, an older avian merchant, clutching his pearls because Aisha, a serpiente, suggests the dancers should perform in the public marketplace. Lincoln is horrified that young avian children might see such passionate, physically expressive dancing. He views it as highly improper.
It really highlights that building Wyvern's court isn't going to be a magical, frictionless utopia overnight.
No, and as Zane brilliantly points out to Lincoln, compromise doesn't mean hiding from each other. True integration means living side by side and learning to navigate the dissonance. It means letting people make their own mistakes, challenging deeply held social norms, and being uncomfortable. It is a messy, vibrant, chaotic endeavor, the exact opposite of the Falcon's silent, perfect island.
And it is this very willingness to embrace the messy reality of integration that brings about the final, shocking resolution of the deep dive. Because building a new world naturally forces a response from the old one. Zane and Danica are in the dancer's nest, literally looking over the blueprints for this beautiful new society, when suddenly, a seemingly normal serpent in the room reveals herself to be Syfka in disguise.
But she hasn't come with an army this time. She hasn't come to conquer.
No. She steps aside and reveals Ray and Kel, dumped in a back room like discarded luggage. Syfka explains that Valine, the Raven scholar who secretly flew to the Falcon Island, used ancient falcon laws to force their release. Valine found laws signed by the Empress Jarsa herself thousands of years ago, laws recognizing the sovereignty of the Dancer's Nest.
And because Anmik's magic binds the Falcons to their ancient vows, remember, their power is based on structural integrity and unbreakable bonds, the Empress was legally, magically forced to honor the petition. But the Falcons do not surrender gracefully. They exact a horrific, beautiful price for this freedom.
The binding.
Yes. The Empress's mercy has bound Ray and Kel's magic. They have been permanently stripped of their immortal falcon forms, and, most chillingly, their memories of the White City of Anmik's magic and of their past lives have been magically excised to protect the island's secrets.
Syfka sneers at them as she leaves. She calls them just mortals now. She genuinely believes that this exile, this loss of magic and memory, is a punishment far worse than execution. The physical toll on them is devastating. When Zane and Danica rush into the room, Kel is covered in livid welts, bruises, and deep cuts. Her back and shoulders are covered in thick, silver magical scars where her magic was violently bound. She is starving and exhausted.
It's a miracle they survived.
Ray is completely unconscious from the trauma of the binding, but when Kel wakes up and realizes she is back in the Dancer's Nest, back in the noisy, chaotic, colorful world of the lower courts, she just sighs, leans back, and says, "How good it is to be here."
It is the ultimate ideological defeat of the Falcon Empire. Syfka leaves in absolute disgust, believing Ray and Kel have been condemned to a hellish existence of mortality, pain, and eventual death. To a 2,000-year-old immortal, losing your magic and your lifespan is the ultimate degradation. But to Cal and Ray, being mortal in a flawed, loving, vibrant community is an absolute paradise compared to the cold, torturous perfection of the White City.
I want the listener to really consider the weight of that choice. Think about what they sacrificed. They gave up immortality. They gave up godlike magic that could literally shape reality. They gave up their very memories of their past lives. They let themselves be physically scarred and magically bound. And they did all of that just for the right to be mortal.
Just to be human, essentially.
So for the right to feel pain, to bleed, to age, and to choose who they love, would you make that trade? Could you give up the power of a god for the vulnerability of a human? Because the moment Ray wakes up, the emotional climax of the story hits. Kel, a former elite executioner for the Empress, turns to Ray, the former royal heir. She breaks all traditional avian protocol and asks Ray to be her Alistair.
And Ray, who refused to swear the vow when he was a powerful falcon, accepts her proposal as a mortal crow. They choose each other, not as perfect immortal gods, but as flawed, scarred, vulnerable mortals. It perfectly encapsulates Anhamarach's gift of free will. They are no longer bound by Amic's determinism. They are free to dance, to love, and to help build Wyvern's court alongside Zane and Danica. They bought their freedom with their magic and their memories, proving that the messy, painful reality of love and community is inherently more valuable than isolated, sterile perfection.
We've journeyed through an incredibly dense political and emotional landscape today. We started with ancient mythological schisms that fractured a civilization into rigid binaries of freedom and bondage. We waded through the brutal, muddy reality of political prejudice, where the very people you saved would rather restart a war than accept a mixed bloodline. We witnessed the terrifying mechanics of magical assassination, the obliteration of free will, and the chilling arrival of a godlike empire that views humanity as disposable insects. And finally, we saw the heartbreaking, incredible sacrifices made for love, leading to the birth of a radical new society, Wyvern's Court.
It is a profound, unflinching exploration of what it actually takes to build a lasting peace. It isn't just about putting down weapons. It requires confronting the ghosts of the past, actively dismantling systemic hatred, and being willing to sacrifice everything you thought defined you. Your forms, your magic, your legacy, to create a completely new space where the next generation can simply exist without fear.
Which leaves us with a final, lingering question to ponder. Zane, Danica, Kel, and Ray sacrificed almost everything, their bodies, their magic, their people's deepest traditions, to buy the ground for Wyvern's Court. But what happens when that unborn child, the little Wyvern girl, finally grows up in this utopian valley? Will a child born entirely into peace, who has never known the terror of a falcon's shadow, the sting of Umhaj poison, or the crushing weight of systemic prejudice, ever truly understand the horrific cost her parents paid to buy that peace? Or is a generation raised in a utopia doomed to take that peace for granted, entirely forgetting the muddy, bloody waters their parents had to wade through to get there? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.